A lot of people think it's great. They go, oh, I'd love to be a psychic detective. I'd like to do this, but it's not really glamorous, and people seem to think it is. I think the important thing is about assisting people and wanting to help solve something, but then you might get too far involved in it that you actually become the target.
Welcome to the Spirit Sisters podcast. My name is Karina Machado, and I'm the author of Spirit Sisters, Women's True Stories of the Paranormal. In this podcast, I'll revisit the women behind my most unforgettable stories and unearth new tales to chill, intrigue, astound, and offer hope. You'll hear first-hand accounts of sacred journeys, spirit encounters, near-death experiences, angels, mysteries, marvels, and love more powerful than death. Whatever you believe about the afterlife, I invite you to open your minds and hearts as ordinary people reveal their extraordinary encounters. I acknowledge the Darawal people, who are the traditional custodians of the land of Sutherland Shire in Australia, where I live and record Spirit Sisters, and I recognise their continuing connection to lands, waters and community. I pay respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures and to elders past, present and emerging. You're listening to Spirit Sisters. I'm your host, Karina Machado. From a chilly autumnal Sydney, I'm happy to have your company today. Before we launch into the episode, I want to say thank you to everyone who's written to me over the last couple of months to share how much the podcast means to them. I'm really aware that I haven't responded to everybody. I do apologise for that. I read and cherish every message you send me, and I do plan to eventually get back to all of my lovely listeners. There's just been so much going on lately as the departure date looms for my journey across Spain along the Camino, the Way of St. James. Have you done the Camino? If so, drop me a line. I'd love to hear about it. I'm travelling with my dear friend Sarah, who shared her story about her near-death experience in 2 episodes on the Spirit Sisters podcast back in 2019. As you can imagine, we're beyond excited for our pilgrimage, and I'll share some exciting news about our adventure very soon. For now, and speaking of walking with Spirit Sisters, today I'm welcoming psychic medium Debbie Malone to the podcast. Debbie and I have known each other for many years. I first told her story in my 2009 book, Spirit Sisters. Gosh, that sounds like a long time ago, right? And she made another appearance in the follow-up, Where Spirits Dwell. As an internationally acclaimed psychic medium, psychic detective, and spiritual teacher, Debbie has spent the last 3 decades plus assisting police departments around the world with high-profile missing persons and murder investigations. A student of the prestigious Arthur Findlay College, Debbie is a best-selling author who's often featured in the media, and she's in high demand for speaking engagements and other appearances. In our interview today, Debbie shares the near-death experience that ignited her psychic gifts and casts back to when her dreams were taken over by 2 victims of the notorious backpacker murders, and how this confronting situation catapulted her into her work as a psychic detective. We'll talk all about that today, so this is a great episode for anyone interested in true crime. For listeners who may not be familiar with the backpacker murders, this refers to Australian serial killer Ivan Milat, who murdered 7 young backpackers in New South Wales between 1989 and 1992. Debbie's certain there are actually more victims, as she tells us on the show. Aside from her fascinating work as a psychic detective, we delve into Debbie's recent foray into channeling, her book, Awaken Your Psychic Ability, her thoughts on the current shift in consciousness, and a lot more. Enjoy my conversation with my lovely friend, Debbie Malone. Hi, Debbie. Welcome to Spirit Sisters.
Hi, Karina. So lovely to catch up with you again.
It's so lovely, and gosh, we've been planning this for a long time.
We sure have. So at least today's the day, which is very exciting.
It's very exciting. As I was just saying to you before we pressed record, I reread the story I wrote about you in Spirit Sisters, which was a long time ago. We've known each other for a long time. I published that book in 2009, and your story in there is called Hotline to Heaven. And, oh, gosh, I was just rereading it, marvelling about your life, Deb.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's a lot's changed even since then. It's just Yeah, but even when I look at yours, just seeing how things have evolved with both of us and how our work with spirits got even stronger. It's amazing, isn't it?
It is amazing. And that word evolve is truly it. It's truly accurate. It is evolving and changing. And for me, at least, I find it's leading me to a very different place, compared to where I was when I began this whole sort of inquiry.
And I think that's the thing. I feel that they above us, our spirit friends, have more of an idea of the map that they have for us than we do. And sometimes it's like we feel like we're walking along this journey, sort of half blinded, I suppose. And then suddenly they shine us a light on us and show us which way to go, which is really quite exciting in itself.
Oh, I love how you put that. Yeah, they're shining a light for us and the path is being made ever clearer for us.
Yeah, which is good. Sometimes though it leads you down paths, and you kind of think, "Oh, I didn't ever think I'd be doing that," and then you get a bit further down the track, and you actually realise what all of that was about. Yeah, it's fun and interesting.
Following the crumbs. Well, I would have read an introduction out so our listeners will know about you, but why don't we just talk a little bit more about you? You're one of Australia's most well-known psychic mediums. The work that you've been doing with spirit is so vast. It touches on so many different points of interest, and I know that you've had 6 near-death experiences. I think one primarily which really kicked off your psychic abilities. I wonder if you want to start telling us about those.
Yeah, of course. So I had my first near-death experience when I was 3, but and then I had the next one when I was 13 when I had my appendix out, and I've had to have a lot of anaesthetics over my life, and that seems to have sort of set things off with my spiritual path. I used to see spirit as a child, but I shut it down. My mum used to tell me I just spoke about it to get attention, but I was actually terrified because I used to see and hear things when I'd go to bed at night. Yes, my most vivid near-death experience was when I had to have a major operation. My daughter was 1, my middle son was 3, and my eldest son, he was 7. And I kept having visions that I was going to die before the operation. I even got a will made the night before, and everybody thought I was just being a bit over dramatic. But I just had this feeling, and even before they gave me the anaesthetic, I told the doctors that I was going to the light. And I remember them just looking at me and sort of going a bit pale and saying, "Oh, no, aren't you going to hang around and see what we're doing?" And I was like, "I don't like the sight of blood. Just make sure you put me back together okay." But I didn't realise that I was allergic to morphine. So after had the operation, I was put on a morphine drip, and I went on this incredible journey. And it was terrifying, but it was also very enlightening. And the way I'd have to describe it is, I saw the movie Contact about 2 weeks after I finally returned home from hospital. I was supposed to be only in there for 3 days. I was in there for 6 weeks, and I was allergic to the morphine. And when they put me on the drip, I had no idea. And so every time I had pain, they'd say push. There was like a little button that was attached to the morphine. So they just kept saying, "Well, push the button, and that will stop the pain." And then I started to hallucinate, and I started to see like devilly type things. I could see snakes and all these really weird things going on. And then the nurse sort of said, "I think there's something going wrong." So I said to her that I was going to the light, and then she said to me, "Oh, no, not on my shift. There's going to be too much paperwork." And she was kind of joking. And then she went to go on a break, and as she did, my heart monitor stopped. And then she came back and she started shaking me to bring me back round. And then they took me off the drip, but I had gone in this incredible journey, and it was like I was on a roller coaster, and I was sort of being pushed and pulled in all these different directions. I was part of the universe. It was like I was catapulting up through the heavens, and I was seeing beautiful constellations, and it's like an astronaut that didn't have a suit on, and I was seeing all of these incredible visions and stars. And then there was this like a black hole. It turned into being the tunnel and went through, and the white light was there, and it was really pulling me through really, really quickly. And at the time, there were other beings that were going up there as well. And there was a lot of shaking going on, and that's where it was like being on the roller coaster, getting tossed and thrown all around the place. And then suddenly I came up into this huge, immense light, and I landed in what was like a beautiful field. And the field had grass that was it was a little bit longer, so it might have been say 15 centimeters high, and there was a gentle breeze, and the grass was flowing back and forth, and everything was more colourful than what it is here on Earth. It just seemed brighter and more beautiful. And then I looked ahead of me, there was this line of people, and they were lining up, and they were going through like a gate, which I don't know if it was the pearly gates of heaven, but it was just like this little gate, and there was like a privet hedge. So you could have jumped over the hedge to get in. And when it was my turn, they said to me, "No, you're not allowed to come through." And I was a bit cross because I thought I've waited in line, and I hate when people push in front of me at the supermarket or the deli line. And but I said to them, "No, I'm here," and I could see people on the other side. I can't remember who they are now, but there was these faces of a lot of people. I just felt immense love and joy and peace, and I felt like I knew these people. And they said to me, "No, no, you must turn around." So when I turned around, they made me look down. And as I looked down, it was like I was looking down from the heavens down to earth, and I could see my husband with my 3 children. And the 2 boys were saying, "Where's mummy? Where's mummy?" And he was pointing up saying, "Oh, mummy's not coming back. Mummy's in heaven now." And then suddenly I felt myself just falling and falling. And then I woke up back in the bed in the hospital room. The nurses and doctors were running around me, and all the pain came flooding back in again, and I sort of came to, and then thought, geez, that was heaven. I wanted to go back at that stage because I felt like I was in hell when I got back into my body with all the pain. But that was something that really, really significantly changed my life.
Would you say, Deb, that was the most profound of your 7 near-death experiences?
That, and then I had another one in 2019. I was falsely diagnosed with carcinoid lymphoma, and I was told that I was probably not going to make it past the February. I had to have all these tests, and they weren't sure because with carcinoid lymphoma, it's an autoimmune cancer, and it can be in your lungs, your liver, your bowel, your stomach. And so I had to go through all these tests. They weren't sure where it was, but I did come up positive. So I went to have a PET scan. And when I had it, I didn't know again, I was allergic to the iodine that they gave me. So they sort of gave me this injection. Then I had to lie in a room in the dark and wait till they came and got me. Then I had to drink like a tracer afterwards. And after they gave me the injection, everything started to get really hot. And I felt like I was on fire. My heart was burning. It went sort of down to my feet, then back up into my brain. And I felt I was going, and I was that unwell, I didn't think to bring the buzzer. And I was just laying there. Next thing you know, I felt this beautiful angel just lifting me up out of the chair, and he took me up again, up to the heavens, and I was above the earth, and it was like I was floating above the earth, and there was all these angels around me. And I could see, it was like the sunlight was coming up over the earth, so I could see all this light coming towards me, and I felt I was floating there. And then they just said to me, "Don't worry, it'll be okay, you'll be fine." And then they put me back into the room, and then the nurse finally came in, and I said, "Look, something's going wrong." And she said, "No, no, you'll be fine." And I drank the tracer, and I kind of came back okay. I was still not very well, but had the PET scan. And then the guy that gave it to me was pretty angry. He said to me, "I don't know what you're here for, you're wasting my time." And then after that, he just sort of left me, and because it was a Friday night, because they rushed me in because they wanted to see urgently what the results were. And the hospital was closed in that section, and I had to find my way down to the bottom. I couldn't see properly, and for another 2 weeks I could hardly see. I was very, very sick, and just in a bad way. But then when I went back and got the results, they all came back negative. So I was very grateful for that experience. So I think that was another little visit from heaven to sort of say, maybe I'm here for a bit longer yet.
You've got important work that you do and that you have been doing for decades, actually, Deb, which we will talk about. So it seems that, well, I know this from knowing you and having written about you, Deb, but the near-death experience that you described before this last one, and that was your latest one in 2019?
Yes.
Yeah. So the one before that, the one you described when you had the 3 young children, I think you were in your late 20s then, is that right, Deb?
Yeah, I was 33.
Oh, 33, okay.
Yeah.
So that one was the one that really sort of ignited your psychic abilities, if I'm remembering correctly, even though, as you say, you'd always had a connection to spirit as a little girl. So,
yes.
Yeah, so let's talk about 2 things. One is I do want to talk about what happened after that near-death experience that really sort of gave the rocket. It really sent your experiences and your abilities firing off. But let's go back to when you were a little girl. Tell me about your first memory of spirit, and also if you had, growing up, any sort of spiritual foundation or philosophy that was around you in your upbringing.
Yes, I when I was 3, I had bronchiolitis, and I almost died from that. So, the first connection with spirit was when I was in the hospital. I was in the Camperdown Children's Hospital, and this beautiful being. I thought it was a nurse, but she was like glowing white, and she was around me. I remember coughing, and I felt I couldn't breathe, and all I wanted was my mum and dad, but they lived a long way away at the time that this happened. And so they'd come to visit me that day, but it was during the night. And this lady just came and comforted me and sort of settled me down. And then I was brought up Catholic, so I always believed there was something there. I didn't know what. I was still always been a bit of a skeptic. But when I had my appendix out at 13, then that's when I always felt different. I used to see things around me, and I remember with the near-death experience when I was 13, I actually left my body. My heart had stopped during the night after the operation, and I thought I'd been dreaming, because when I woke up in the morning, there was a big oxygen tank beside me, and the nurse came in and said, "Oh, we're just coming in to check you to see if you're okay. Your heart stopped." And I thought that was a dream, because I had been watching them running around in the room, but I was floating in the corner of the room on the ceiling watching my body, and I just thought that I just had, been dreaming something. And then when they confirmed it, and then after that, I really wanted to find out more about things. And I remember going to the school library, and Raymond J. Moody's book, Life After Life, had come out. So I read that as quickly as I possibly could, and kind of made sense. But when I tried to speak to any of my friends about it, they didn't want to know about it. It wasn't something you spoke about back then. So that was part of it. But then my grandfather died when I was 15. And I was very, very close to him. And after he died, I used to see him, and he used to come and visit me. And he'd sit in my bedroom on the end of the bed. He'd never talk to me, but he'd like a see-through blue glow. So for me, I accepted that, because he belonged to me. It wasn't like I was seeing a ghost. I was just seeing my pop. Then when I got about 18, I had the feeling that I kept getting this little message in my head that, oh, you could be psychic, and I didn't want to know about it. So I shut it down. But then had my first son, because I was told I couldn't have children, but I was lucky I've got 3. So I had my first son, then I miscarried between him and then my second son. And the miscarriage opened things up. But then after I had my daughter, even things, because I started doing readings. It's be 31 years this year. So I've been doing them quite a while. I used to be a graphic designer.
Yes, you were a graphic designer. I remember that. And I think it's quite beautiful how your grandfather came to you and gave you comfort, and you knew he was your person. And that, in a way, sort of is like a precursor of the work that you would come to do for so many hundreds, thousands of bereaved people. You would let them know that their loved one is with them, is still there, not just, but in a transformed way, so no longer in their physical. I think that's quite beautiful. It's almost like your grandfather, he gave you like a little taster of what you would do.
Definitely, and I find the funny thing about this as well, when my first son arrived, he was born on my grandfather's birthday.
Oh.
So I felt he was a gift from heaven. And then my second son was born 24 hours before that, but 4 years later. So,
wow.
So I felt like he's had a big part of my life, even though he's been gone since I was 15.
And so, Deb, let's go into sort of the crux of your triggering of your psychic gifts when you began to have dreams of the young women who were murdered in the infamous backpacker murders. And I think the dreams began in, was it the early 1990s?
Yeah, it was when I was pregnant with my middle son. It started then. I was working at Fairfax community newspapers, and at the time the backpacker murders were massive on the television, and it was just, we were flooded with it. It was on the radio every time you looked at the news, there would be something happening. And I wasn't really into true crime or anything like that at the time, but I just kept seeing it. And then I would go to bed and I would dream the next thing that was going to be on the news the next day. So at first, the two English girls used to come to me in my dreams, and it was like they were pleading with me to come and find them. And then it was as though I was walking behind them. Sometimes it was like I was the murderer and leading them off into the forest, and other times it was like I was an observer watching what they were doing. But they were giving me little snippets of different things, of locations and different vehicles, and I think there was perpetrators. I could see that there was two perpetrators. Not always, not from the beginning. I could see one, but then I could see there was another one. And then I started to see other victims because I had this vision of going to this house sort of down around the Picton, sort of down around that kind. It felt like that kind of area. It was like a bush area. I kept getting. There was a cave that I kept getting the name of, Moreton Caves, and I didn't even know Moreton Caves existed. But I kept being told I was down around that area, and that Moreton Cave actually backs onto Belanglo if you go from sort of the Wellindilly Shire area. I looked that up later, and then we have to remember that the internet wasn't around then, and mobile phones were only just coming in. So if you wanted to check anything with a map, you'd have to go and physically buy the map. You couldn't just get on the computer and look it up. And then I found out, yes, there was Moreton Caves, and then they were showing me. They showed me a whole lot of different things, but in particular, there was one gentleman that they had. It was like he'd gone to this person's place and he was sitting around a bonfire and having a few beers. And then I was like I was him. That I walked into the kitchen, and then behind this old lead light dresser, there was all these Polaroid shots of all these faces on the wall in the vision. And a lot of the faces were the people of the missing. And at that stage, they weren't all linked up. But later on, it came to be that the faces I had seen in the photos were actually victims.
Gosh, that is extraordinary. So do you feel that this scene that you saw in the dream had actually played out, or do you feel that you were shown sort of a collage of the victims' faces so that you could know who they were? Or do you think the perpetrator actually took the photos and had them there behind this dresser?
It felt very real, and I wouldn't be surprised if they had done something like that, because a lot of the time, especially serial killers, like to keep a trophy of what they do, whether it's an actual item of the victims or whether it is, having a photo. So I think it was a bit of both. Sometimes when you do get the visions, they're not just simple. It's like pieces of a puzzle or glimpses. Sometimes I've worked on a case, and there was one, Mary Cerritos Joyner, and I kept being told that she was in fetal position in the dark. The word was breakdown and going through the national park to Wollongong. And so at first I thought that she may have had a breakdown, like a mental breakdown, and she was fetal position, put herself in fetal position in the dark in a hotel or something in Wollongong. But what it was that her husband had murdered her. She was in fetal position in the dark. She was in the boot of the car. And he was driving through the Royal National Park on his way to Wollongong, and the car broke down. So all of the information was right, but it wasn't verbatim as how it actually took place. So sometimes, it eludes you. Sometimes it doesn't always come. There's a couple of different ways that the meanings can be.
Yes, you have gone on, as you just implied there, you have gone on to work with the police in various capacities, although they never speak in public about relying or having support from psychic mediums. I mean, it's such an amazing thing that you do, Deb. I'd like to just backtrack a little to that time in the early 1990s when you were dreaming of these girls. And, and as you said, you were sometimes from seeing the scene play out from the perspective of the killer, which must have been like just to be dreaming this. And it was almost nightly, wasn't it, that you were seeing them, the two English girls at first?
It was. Yeah, it was nightly. I was getting to the point I was too frightened to go to sleep, because I knew that, the next episode was going to start as soon as I shut my eyes. Back then I couldn't do what I do now. Now I can just be wide awake and talking to you, and I can tune in and see things straight away. Whereas before I'd have to be in a semi-meditative state or asleep, and that's how I would see it. But I got a bit too close in that case, because sometimes through working on that, I could be the victim. I could actually be the murderer, so I would feel the pain of the victims. But then I also got to the point where I felt the murderers knew that I was there too. It was like they were watching me, watching them. So that was quite extraordinary and frightening. And a lot of the things that I did come up with, they ended up being correct. I'll never say that a psychic, especially myself, that you solve a crime. We're more of a part of a puzzle and another tool that can be utilised to help assist police. I think it's arrogant to say that, like you watch the show Medium and at the end she solved the crime. I think that that's a bit too far-fetched. I mean, there is an extraordinary group in America called Find Me, and they have psychics all around the world. And I was a part of that. I just haven't had time to sort of continue. But they have retired law enforcement and rescue and sniffer dogs, and they work on crimes all around the world, predominantly in the US. But they will sort of ask people if they want to tune into a case. They'll give you a photograph and the last GPS coordinates of the person, and then everybody tunes in, and then they send their report off to the head of the group, and then all the information's collated. And they've been very successful in solving many crimes through using that. And it's all done, everybody volunteers their time, and even the retired law enforcement. It's a wonderful group, and I wish we could do something like that here.
It sounds fantastic, and it also sounds like everybody's working together, and retired law enforcement who perhaps at a time might have dismissed this possibility. And that is indeed what happened to you, Deb, isn't it? At the beginning, when you finally, after having these nightly horror shows in your dreams, you eventually went to the police. And what happened?
Oh, that was very interesting. To start with, a friend of mine, she had a girlfriend who was a police officer, so I spoke to her first. Then she put me in touch with her husband, who was also a police officer, and then I ended up being put in contact with the head of the Backpackers Task Force Air, and then they wanted to know everything about me. He wanted to know what my doctor's names were, and then they wanted to know where I was at certain times, because if I knew about those things, that I must have been involved, or so I could become a suspect. And then they also wanted to know if I had mental health issues, because why am I talking to dead people and why am I seeing these things? And then they finally started to believe, and they just said, look, I want you to keep a diary, and if you just write the date and whatever you see. And they said, don't think about putting it into order, just write it all down. And then they gave me, there was 2 detectives that would come and pick up the diary that I would keep when I had enough information. And then when I was working at the newspaper, one of the journalists had been talking to him about it, and he said to me, right, we're going to do a story about you. And they gave me the name of Julia instead of my real name. And then he said, right, I want you to pick the demographics of which newspaper you want it to go to. And so Fairfax Community had, probably 30, 36 papers at the time. So I said to them, I wanted it to go to the MacArthur Advertiser, because I knew that the murderer was going to be there. And it went to Eaglevale, which is where Ivan Milat lived. And then after the newspaper story went out, his girlfriend, Sherlinda Hughes, made contact with the newspaper, and she wanted to meet up with me. And I didn't ever meet up with her, but we did have numerous phone calls over the time. And on this one particular day, she said to me, because she wanted me to help get him off because she thought he was innocent, but which was frightening, unless they didn't have caller ID back then. But she said to me this one particular morning that you better be careful, they're coming after you. And I didn't realise what she said. My second son was 6 weeks old at that stage, and then a man came to the door, and I didn't have a screen on the front door at that stage, and the driveway used to be on the side of the house, and then the kitchen window you could look out, and my car was there. And I went to open the door, and something said to me, don't open the door. So I didn't. And I said, who's there? And nobody answered. So then I went to the kitchen window and I looked out, and I could see the reflection of a man leaning flat back on the wall of my house with all this wiring caught up in his hands. And so I didn't say anything. And then he hung around out the front for about an hour. So then I rang the task force and I said, look, something's going on. There's a guy out the front. And then I rang the electricity board, because he had a Sydney electricity car. So I rang them and I said, is there someone supposed to be checking our power? Because the meter was only read last week. And they said, no one's supposed to be there. And then I rang the police again. They said, just stay in the house, and as soon as he goes, just get out of the house. So he drove around the corner. I didn't realise that, but I got out of the house, and then I stayed at a friend's all day, and then yeah, we sort of had to go from there. But that was pretty terrifying.
That's chilling, Deb. That's chilling. I'm surprised the police didn't come. Like they gave you advice, but they didn't come to see who was there.
No, they said to me that they were, if anything further happened, that they would keep,
Yeah.
thought about keeping me under surveillance. But yeah, that was a bit too close, and I think it really hit home to think, well, this is very serious things to be involved in, and a lot of people think it's great. They go, oh, I'd love to be a psychic detective. I like to do this, but it's not really glamorous, and people seem to think it is. I think the important thing is about assisting people and wanting to help solve something, but then you might get too far involved in it that you actually become a target. So yeah, it's a really fine line.
And so you were involved behind the scenes with investigating this for, I think it was 4 years, wasn't it, Deb?
Yes.
And,
yes.
And yeah, so even though the police never formally acknowledged you, you were an important piece of the puzzle, and it did signal an important new phase in your life, which was the embracing and the acceptance of your gift. And what a terrifying kind of baptism of fire. I mean, Belangolo eventually gave up 7 battered young bodies, and it was just one of the most horrific things, really, wanted to be involved in for you. So an amazing sacrifice.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was definitely horrific, and I still think there are many more bodies, but well, now he's passed away. I think only time will tell. But I think the reason that I continued was the thought that there's somebody's children that was that's been taken, or someone's mother or brother or sister, and yeah, I think if something like that had happened to my family, I would hope someone like me would be able to help if they had the knowledge.
And Deb, you went on to work with with the police on other high-profile cases. Claremont was one that was in Western Australia that you worked on. Was it a case then of you really accepting your gifts and being willing to go where you were led?
Yes, I was invited to work on that case through. I was working with 2 other mediums, and they were doing a project called Psychic Task Force. I go under hypnosis at times for cases. There was 2 other women that were part of the team. They're not psychics, but they were sort of part of the production team, and so we did a lot. We actually went out to all of the locations where the girls' bodies were found. The other guys, they didn't really do any of that. And then I did an identikit of what I saw the perpetrator look like. And when he was arrested, it's very, very similar. The hair's slightly curlier in my identikit, but yeah, when he was arrested, it's him. And they even did an aged image of him of what he would look like from then to now, and they put half of his face with my identikit, and it's perfect. Like, it's the nose, everything. And I did work with some of the police over there, but it was hard because there's a lot of resistance in WA. I had a lovely officer that I did work with quite substantially, but then other people tried to block it. Yeah, it's really difficult. And the sadness is that Sarah's never been found, and I think that's really, really hard. But it's hard too, being here in Sydney and then that happening in Perth. I do know we went to one of the locations, and all I kept seeing was those RM lilies, or people call them death lilies, the white lilies with the yellow sort of stamen in the middle.
Yeah.
And when we were walking around, I kept being drawn to this spot, and I kept being told it's here. And the guys are going, no, you're wrong, you're in the wrong spot. And I said, no, it's here. And when we did this thing called Psychic Task Force, it was like a 2-night event over there. I went down the day before and I picked the lilies and I set them up in an arrangement on the stage, and I had 3 of them. And unbeknownst to me, some of the task force officers came backstage afterwards, and they said, how did you know to arrange the flowers like that? And I said, that's what the girls told me to do. And then they showed me the badge for the task force, had the 3 lilies on it, and that was their special logo.
Oh, wow, Debbie. Yeah. So did the girls come to you, the Claremont girls come to you in dreams like the backpacker girls did, or have you had any other murder victims come in dreams in that way?
Yes, the girls came to me. Before I even went over there, I was asked to do it. And I was really, really sick with the flu. And I was pretty delirious. And then sometimes when I'm in that kind of state, I was getting so much information about what to do and where to go. So when I got over there, it was pretty. I had a lot of information already flooding through, which was useful. But yeah, a lot of the time they do come to me in dreams. There was a beautiful young lady, and to this day, I'm so heartbroken that I never found her. Her family are the most incredible, gentle, and beautiful people I've ever met. And I dreamt about her before she died. And I used to do these haunted Sydney tours many years ago. There was a hearse that used to drive around Sydney called Elvira, and a friend of mine owned it. And I used to go and we'd do spirit photography. We'd go to all the haunted locations in Sydney, and then I'd do readings between each location for the people in the car. And then the night I came home from doing a tour, I had this dream of I was sitting in the hearse called Elvira, and I was at the lights. The owner his name's Alan, and at the lights there was another car directly beside me, and it was a hearse as well, which is odd that it had no roof on it. It looked like like a topless hearse, and the guy sitting driving was right next to me because I was in the passenger side in the other car. And I could see him really clearly, and he had dark hair, dark eyes, and he just looked dangerous. I just didn't like him. And then there was this beautiful young lady with sort of lighter brown hair and very beautiful smile, and just really full of life. And she looked over at me, and then I'm looking at him, and I'm just thinking, please get out of the car, get out of the car. And then the vehicle just drove off. And then I woke up in the morning, and I didn't think much of it. And then one of the officers that I'd worked with on the task force for the backpacker murders, he was head of the case. And that was the only reason I rang, was I thought, I'm not doing this stuff anymore. I don't want to know about it. And anyway, I rang him, and because 2 weeks, it was 2 weeks after I had the dream, there was a missing persons report, and her name was Neve May, and that she was missing. And so I knew what the guy looked like, but then I had to try and put all the pieces together of what had happened. And her beautiful family had sent me some items of hers to hold, and I got a lot of information. Then it was arranged that I would go down to the Tumut area to see what I could see. And we did a lot of searching, and there was an area that she showed me that she had been with. And the other thing that I didn't mention, he owned a hearse, but it had a roof on it, and the last vehicle she was seen in was a hearse. So she had gone missing with this man in my dream. So he was actually the last person she was seen with. And when I went to Tumut, I sort of said to them I wanted to go to this place called Blowering Dam. Never been there before in my life. Didn't even know how to get there. We started driving along, and there'd been a lot of rain the week before, and all the road was washed out, so we had to go a different way. And they asked me which way I wanted to go, and I was just guided. And I knew I had to drive past an area where there was black and white cows, and there's only one spot in that area. And we drove past that, and she more or less guided me to the spot. And then we stopped at this part of the bush, and we got out of the car, and I said, I just wanted to be around. I said, I want to be around here. And they showed me a photograph, and we were standing on the exact same spot that a photo of him and her were taken with the hearse, and we're standing right on it.
So, Debbie, let me just get this straight so I can understand. So you had this dream of being in the hearse, which is where you used to work in the hearse doing these haunted Sydney tours, and in your dream you looked over and there was another hearse, and there was this lovely young woman in there. And eventually, if I'm following correctly, it did turn out that this young woman was a missing person and a murder victim. How did you put those two pieces together? If you dreamt of her prior to this news coming out, how did it become apparent to you that she was a missing person?
Well, 2 weeks later, they had a missing persons sort of media report, and they actually showed the photograph of her, and that was the woman I'd seen in my dreams, and I knew then that what I dreamt about was real.
Wow, and that's when you reached out to your contact?
Yes, I did.
In the police?
I ended up, after a few months, I ended up going down there to try and see if I could find her.
Okay, and so it's very interesting that the alleged perpetrator had a hearse and you were working in a hearse. Do you feel like that point of resonance is what kind of psychically drew you to her or drew her to you?
Yeah, I wonder about that, because sometimes there's a lot of similarities in your life to what you actually experience, even when it comes to the cases or how you come to be part of it. It's very strange. I think the universe works in mysterious ways, and if you're meant to do something, then they will give it to you in a roundabout kind of a way.
Yeah, all the points of connection between us, all those little crumbs that you talked about before.
Definitely. Sometimes it's really hard when you think about it rationally. You think, how on earth could that happen? And people say about coincidences, but I don't think there are coincidences. I just think down here on earth we think that, but up there I'm sure that they try to lead us on a map so we can join the dots.
And so, Debbie, we've talked about your involvement with a couple of high-profile police cases, but I feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the bulk of your work is dedicated to seeing bereaved people and giving them messages of comfort from their loved ones on the other side. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true. And I'm also starting to do more teaching because a lot of people are starting to awaken, and I even feel it's been going on so the last well, ever since I started, but it's getting more and more acceptable for this type of um, topic to be spoken about. But so many, look, everybody's born psychic, and I think a lot of us are actually wanting to explore that and learning how to work with it. And after COVID, there's been so much loss and so much time on our own. I feel a lot of people have started to think it's time to reawaken.
Reawaken to what we've always been, which is a spiritual being?
Definitely, and I think it's almost like it's time to sort of get back to your roots and really. I just feel like there's something bigger out there, and I think that we're now starting to want to explore that.
Yeah, so that's the thought you had as a very little girl, as did I. There's something more out there, there's something bigger. So you mentioned this awakening for humanity, and I'd really love to just dig a little bit deeper into that with you, because I've been pondering that as well, and it seems like there is something enormous happening at the moment in terms of a shift and up-leveling in consciousness. What are your thoughts around that, Debbie?
Yeah, I totally agree that is taking place, and it seems to be getting quicker and quicker. And it's hard because we see that there's so much tragedy around the world at the moment. Apart from COVID was a huge tragedy, but it was also, I think, a resetting or a rethinking where we started to respect one another again. I think we were getting to a point where we're becoming very selfish. But I think unfortunately, through loss, and I think people have experienced it previously through the wars, that, life is just, it's so important, but it's so fragile, and at the blink of an eye, it can end. And I think it's more of us starting to be more connected and be more appreciative and realise, going out in the garden's lovely, looking up at the sky, or even just creating memories with loved ones, because we don't know how long we're here for. But I also think it's nice to think of ways where we can connect with those that are here with us and those that have gone before us.
And that's the work that's been so key for you for 31 years, as you say. Tell us a bit about what a day in the life of Debbie looks like, and maybe share one or two of the most impactful stories of connection that you've had the honour of sharing with your clients.
Okay. Normally I do a bit of numerology now because I see people remotely. I don't see people in person anymore. So I will be, someone will be booked in for a reading. I'll tune into their photograph, and it's amazing because I used to do psychometry. So I used to hold a piece of jewelry, and from holding that would be like watching television, and the piece would just talk to me, and I would be like seeing visions and things. But when I tune in remotely, I tune into the person's energy and their photograph. It's like the photo's a still photo. But when I'm looking at it, it's like I'm seeing all these different pictures about their life, and like I'll see signs and symbols, loved ones that are around them, and they'll appear to me in my room here, even though they're passed away, and where the person might be on the other side of the world, but I'll be able to contact their loved ones and see them and pass the messages on. So it might be someone wants to know about their past or present. Generally, there's a lot about loved ones, but there's a lot about work and people's love life. It's all different things, but sometimes it's about people's pets. Yeah, it's all different sorts of things, but it's reading can be really quite funny. I've had some really interesting ones quite a few years ago now. I did a reading for a young lady and her friend. I didn't know at the time that her friend was in spirit, and her friend came in and sat beside her, and they were only in their early 30s, and her friend was sitting there, the one in spirit, and she had like a striped t-shirt on and a pair of jeans. And I said to her girlfriend, because her girlfriend in spirit was holding her breasts and sort of pointing to them, and then she said to me that she'd had breast cancer and she'd had a double mastectomy. And I said to the lady who, the living person, I said, I have your girlfriend here, and she's telling me she died of breast cancer, and, she had a mastectomy. And then, unbeknownst to the lady, the living lady, her friend just ripped up a T-shirt and just showed me her breasts and showed me, look, they're back. And, she was joggling them around in front of me. I started laughing, and she's saying to me, it's not very funny. My friend had breast cancer. And I said, yes, I know. And when I told her what she was doing, she said, oh, my God, that would be so her. When I related to her, she said, yeah, well, she wants you to know that she's healed and she's back to being perfect again. And they're nice and perky. And so she thought that was quite funny. But it was weird because I'd never sort of seen that sort of funny side of things before. So I find if they have a really funny, cheeky sense of humour before they pass, then they'll still keep that with them, when they go. But you see, I have some beautiful messages that come through with loved ones, and, people, their mum might have passed away before their child was born, and then they'll talk about how they gave the child to their daughter, and, just different messages of connection, and just sort of saying that, that love never dies, even though physically the body dies, the soul lives on, and that they're only a thought away from us, really.
Oh, what a beautiful message. Tell me about how you feel that your work is evolving and changing. What's next for you? What do you feel like you might be stepping into?
I think I'd like to do more in the teaching space. I would like to try and set a group up like Find Me here in Australia, but it is very daunting, and it's hard because of police forces. And, each state has different rules, and I think that some officers believe and some don't. So it's kind of trying to really break down the barriers in that respect. I think it's more a matter of people even just teaching them how to become more connected to themselves and their higher self, and, wanting to live, I think, is very important, not waiting to die, because a lot of the time people get quite depressed and sad. And I think what we need to do is focus on creating the memories that we can while we're here, because when we die, that's what we're going to take with us. I mean, it's nice to have a great house and a car and to have, holidays and things. I mean, the holidays are good because you got to create memories, but I think, worrying so much about material wealth, that's not going to be what you take with you. So I think it's about making the most and sort of helping people connect and appreciate each other. And I feel that's part of my journey. I'd like to teach people more to become connected, I suppose.
And just speaking of you teaching, you do have your book, which was recently re-released, Awakening Your Psychic Gifts, I think it's called.
Yeah, Awakening Your Psychic Ability.
Psychic ability. Tell us a little bit about that book.
Yeah, this book's interesting. I've rewritten. It's almost like another half, 1.5 books. I wrote this book because when all of my abilities started to come to the fore, there wasn't really any books out there that had this type of information. There was bits and pieces, but it was back then it was classed as a cult. I remember going to a crystal shop in Cronulla, and I was asking a lady there if there any books, and she sort of pulled me over to her quite quietly and whispered, look, I'll just look out the back, because that we don't really have them on the shelf here, because it's not accepted. And so it made me back then feel like I was doing something wrong, because it's like, if it's it's sort of a hidden thing, and it was classed more as like a witchcraft or a cult type thing, when really it's a natural gift that we all have. So what I wanted to do when I wrote this book is put all the things in there that I've learnt along the way, but make it easy for people to understand. And we have what's called the psychic clairs, and all of us have part of them activated within us anyway. So we have, they say that we have the 6 senses, but there's actually more than that with the clairs, and some of them coincide with our normal senses that we have. Yeah, so we've got clairaudience, which is clear hearing, and sometimes clear hearing. When I was doing the clairaudience, when I looked that up, that hearing voices means you've got mental health issues, but then it actually means that you're psychic. So it was kind of a fine line when you're hearing voices, because if a lot of the time we might hear a voice that might just be a little gut feeling, might say to slow down, there's a radar up ahead, or don't trust this person, or that there's something positive's coming, or you might get ideas pop into your head, or even thoughts of a loved one that just pops into your head and gives you a little message. So they're all little signs of clairaudience. But so if you're getting positive guidance and uplifting messages, then that's not mental health issues. That's actually your spirit guide or loved ones or angels talking to you. And then when we get clairvoyance can come through, seeing spirit with your eyes. It could be seeing signs and symbols with your eyes. You can even get it through your dream state. But, clairvoyance is clear seeing. And we all do that at times. And then we get what's called claircognizance, which is that light bulb moment that we get, or that epiphany. You might be thinking something and suddenly the answer comes. But then we have some other rarer ones. So we've got clairgustance is when we taste something. So sometimes, you might think of Nana might have been passed away for the last 20 years, but you'd go there for Christmas dinner and there was a certain dessert she'd make or a gravy for the baked dinner, and you'd taste that taste and then you would have that memory. With the clairaudience too, with music, we hear certain songs, and when we hear those songs, they can take us back in time, or that it might be a favourite song of a loved one that pops on the radio to give you a sign that they're there. And then we have what's called clairtangency, which is actually connected to psychometry. So clairtangency is clear touch. Sometimes you touch something or you shake someone's hand and you kind of think, oh, I don't like that feeling. Or you might think, oh, that person feels really, they're nice and calm. Or you pick up, you might pick up something in the second-hand shop and you hold it and you think, oh, I don't like that. That's giving me the heebie-jeebies. So they're senses that we all use. And then we have clairsentience, which is our gut feeling, and clair empathy is more in our heart. But when we, that gut feeling is telling you something feels right or something doesn't feel right. So all of these things we have, but we probably wouldn't think about it unless we were sort of delving more into it, that they're actually psychic senses that are there. And if we work with them and exercise them, we can actually make them stronger.
Oh, that's great to know. So that's all in your book?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, okay. And so I wonder, Debbie, if you could share a very simple way that a listener could begin today to begin to connect with their spiritual side, their psychic side.
I think one of the easiest things to do is, well, first of all, meditation's easy. So, it's not easy. It's not easy to still the mind, but it's a nice way to sort of sit quietly, take 10 deep breaths, counting down from 10 down to 1, just slowing down your breathing, just sitting quietly and just asking your guides or angels what your word for the day is or what your message is for the day. You might get a sentence and just sort of see what happens. It may be a word for the day, and then just be alert and see whether you're driving to work or walking somewhere and you see the sign or the word pop up on a sign, or you're watching television or it comes out of a song. So that can be just a little tiny glimpse. The other thing is getting outside in nature, going for walks. See if, a feather might just appear, or you might see a butterfly or a rainbow or a lady beetle, or they can be little subtle signs to say that a loved one's around you and just to remind you that you're not alone.
I love those beautiful little subtle signs that I see during my walks in nature. That's very lovely. And Debbie, you mentioned spirit guides and angels, and of course you had that in your recent near-death experience, that beautiful experience of the angel lifting you up and out. Have you had any further contact from that angel or from any angel? Also, do you know who your spirit guide or spirit guides are?
Yeah, that's interesting. I'll touch on the spirit guide first. The first spirit guide I ever had was one called Running Horse, and I'm not really into American Indians, but he was around me and he was really helpful in the beginning, but now I don't feel him around me as much. I don't sort of know all of their names. I have tried to delve a bit more into it. It's more like I feel them, and I feel like I have a team. I actually have begun doing much more channeling now. So I feel like there's a collective consciousness that comes through me to give information. So I always feel them behind me. Like, for example, if I'm doing a reading for someone and I see they've got ascended masters around them, I don't always see what their guide looks like, but I will see it's almost like coloured lights, and each light is representative of a higher being. But sometimes I will see their angels or their loved ones. With the guardian angels, yes, I feel them around me all the time. I honestly believe if it wasn't for their protection, I would be dead. I've had people come after me through working on the murder investigations, and many years ago, some people forced their way into my very first book talk out at Camden, and then 6 weeks after that, someone broke into my office. They didn't take anything, but I think they were just letting me know that they knew where I was. So that was a bit frightening. And I had some hooded men waiting for me in the car park at one stage as well. But again, my angels warned me that was going to happen, so I was okay. So some of those things have been quite frightening, but I also see that they've pulled me back, with different things. Would say when you're in the car, or or even with illness, I feel that they've saved me through that.
It's chilling, Debbie, to hear that you've had that danger around you because of the work that you do. And you brought up illness, and that is something that I think is something interesting to touch on as well, because I know that you've had, and you've shared a little bit in our conversation today, so many health challenges. And I know that this isn't unusual for people with developed psychic abilities.
Yeah, definitely. I still continue to have some challenges at times, and I think what it is, because, and it's hard being a medium in the fact that when you're connecting with people who are deceased, a lot of people have died from so many different sources, with diseases or cancer or suicides, accidents, and to be able to tune in, you actually make contact, and sometimes you'll feel that in your body, so that can be quite draining. And I think you need to be an empath to be able to make that connection. So even if someone's a living person, then you will feel their pain. I think the most important thing is to be able to clear that, and sometimes it can be harder. I have an amazing kinesiologist that I see, so he sort of helps me with that. But yeah, I do feel, and I do know that a lot of people that do this type of work, yes, they are challenged health-wise. And sometimes people start on this journey through their near-death experiences as well.
Yes, and that's in a way been the case with you. And you mentioned channeling as a recent development. Tell us about your channeling. In what form does it come? Are you writing, or are you speaking and recording it? What's happening there?
Yeah, all of the above. I do write it, and I found even when I was updating the Awaken Your Psychic Abilities book, the new information that was coming through, when I read it back, I was like, wow, I didn't realise I wrote that. And when I do write it, it'll channel through me that way. When I've written my angel cards, again, the information sort of channeled through from the angels. They would just tell me what to write. I'd just sit there. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll open a Word document on my computer, just shut my eyes, and I will just type whatever they tell me, and then I will read back the messages. But I do have some special people in my life where their higher beings will come through me, and I will channel for them and give them messages of guidance from their spirit team. So it can be that way, or I can just shut my eyes and listen to them, but just record it on the phone, then transcribe it as well.
And I wonder if there's any message that's sort of for the wider collective that you've received that you might want to share with us today.
What I feel is that they above us just want us to try and make the most of every heartbeat, and respect and love each other, and create memories, because they're the things that are going to follow us into the next life. And then once we pass, those we leave behind, they will have that memory of us, and we will take the memory of them with us. And I think living for today, and try and be mindful and respectful of each other, because they're the important ththings. Everybody's too short with each other these days. Everybody's too busy, cutting people off in the car, or just rushing past them. And, and I think talking to each other physically is an important thing, because we don't do that anymore. We're losing the art of that. Everything's on a text or an email. We're not, a lot of people, especially older people who aren't really into all the devices, the human voice and human touch is very important. And I think that's what we need to share.
Beautiful message, Debbie, and it's almost paradoxical, isn't it? Because you work with spirits from across the veil, but really the message that they're sharing is about the importance of everyday moment with our feet on the earth today.
Definitely, and I think there's a lot of things. I think a lot of spirits would say to me about the things that they wish they did when they were here, and I think that's why that's an important message that they want to share with the living, because it's make the most of what you have. And don't lament about what you don't have, just appreciate the time that you have your loved ones around you, or your friends.
And do you feel that this is a time where the veil is thinning?
Oh, definitely. I do feel that they're around much more. There seems to be a sense of urgency, and especially with, we've got the war in Ukraine, the possibility and inevitability of war ahead of us. But even just with, I don't know, everybody's so unhappy. I think everybody feels so anxious and worried. Everyone's worried about interest rates and money, and it's a hard time. I feel that's a lot of the time that's when spirit comes closer. I feel they try to come through to give people a sense of ease. they're not all going to come through and give you the lotto numbers. I mean, that would be great, but you'll probably all get $5 if you're lucky. But I think it's, I think it's more a matter of trying to be calm. When you're calm, and I think manifesting is something that I sort of work with. Like when I manifest things, I don't manifest that I've got $1 million, although that would be good, but I try to manifest positive things. I think of the infinite abundance. So then if you've got infinite abundance, you've got enough of everything you need. So it could be finances, but it's also happiness and joy and, having nice people around you. And I think what they're trying to do for us is sort of prepare us and maybe get us to look more at our senses and to be alert and to be mindful of when, so that you can protect yourself when things are starting to go awry.
Yeah, that reminds me what you've just said of how, the blossoming of the spiritualism movement in, I think, the late 1800s was really in preparation for the two big world wars and what we were going to go through. They were steadying us and saying, well, you're not alone. Like, that's what I feel anyway.
Oh, no, I totally agree. Totally agree with you, because it seems that the thinning does start to happen when we're on the precipice of something big. And I think the thing is maybe forewarned is forearmed. Well, I don't think we've learned from the previous wars, because it looks like, same things. It's sort of like the similar sort of things are happening again. It's just a sad feeling, I'm sure, for Spirit, as if to say, haven't you guys learnt anything from that yet?
Yeah. And COVID, as you said, even though it was such a difficult phase in our lives and in the collective, it also brought its gifts, and it was about connecting and also sitting in stillness and quietness. A lot of people found more opportunity to do that in that time, so it served a purpose as well.
Yeah, I do agree with that, and I think a lot of people have said that to me. I think it made people appreciate each other more. I found, especially with the first April when it happened, I decided I was going to take a photograph of the sky every single day for the whole of April, because at that time you couldn't really leave your house you couldn't go very far. I could go to the end of the street. So what I did, I took a photograph from my backyard, my front yard, or just at the end of the street, which is a dead end. It was phenomenal. By the end of the month, I took one every day, whether it was night or day. I was capturing the most amazing images of angels in clouds. I was getting shooting stars. I was getting rainbows. I was just getting all of these phenomenal images. And it was interesting, because if that hadn't happened, it's almost like you don't always take time to look up. And the reason I did it, I thought, well, so many people who were in apartments, they couldn't get out, that you could look out of the window and you can always look at the sky. And every day the sun's going to come up and then it'll go down and the moon will rise. And I thought, if everything else is lost, at least you can look at that and just think, that there's stability in that.
And if you would like to share any of your favourite photos from that time, send them to me, Deb. I can share them on my social media.
Oh, okay, thank you. That would be wonderful. Yeah, I got some little cherubs, and I got an actual couple looking down from the clouds. I got some really unusual things and beautiful shooting stars.
Oh, I'd love to see those. And I know that you have always been skilled in capturing spirit and other beings in your photos. So I would be excited to see anything that you'd like to share in that capacity, Debbie.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I have this amazing photograph of, I think it's William Charles Wentworth at the back of Auckland's house. I actually got his face on my iPhone when we went to his mausoleum.
Oh, well, I'd love to see that.
I was really shocked, because I remember there was only 2 men on the tour, because I ran a ghost tour on Halloween. And so there's only 2 men on the tour, and then everybody was over near there's like a mausoleum at the back of Auckland's house where he's sort of entombed, and there's a wrought iron gate, and so you can put your hand through the gate and just take a photo or walk around. And I sort of left the group all there, and I sort of moved away a bit, and then I felt something in front of me, so I took a photo, and then there was this man standing there, and he had his eyes shut, and I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't even know you were there." And I didn't think much of it, and then I got home and I looked at the photo, and it was like this man with a suit on with a cravat on in his pocket, and there was nobody dressed like that on the tour. And then when I found a photograph of what he looked like, or like a painting of what he looked like, I put them together, and it was him. So he was coming to check me out. Let's see what we're doing.
That's amazing, Debbie. I love all these stories. And as we approach the end of our conversation, I wonder if you have a final uplifting message that you'd like to share. It could be for anybody who's grieving the loss of a loved one today, or it could be just a greater message of positivity for all of us.
I think the most important thing to remember is that, when we do lose a loved one, it's never goodbye. It's always till we meet again, and they will pop in and out of your life while you are still here. So just be aware of the subtle signs, and symbols that you get. And if you do hear them talking to you, it's not because you're going crazy. It's because you're getting voices from the other side and messages of love.
Thank you so much, Debbie. It's been such a joy to reconnect with you today, and I really appreciate you coming on the Spirit Sisters podcast today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun. I just love talking to you. You are a living angel too, you know that.
Oh, Debbie, thank you so much. It's so lovely of you to say.
Oh, my pleasure. It's true though.
Thank you for listening to Spirit Sisters. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe so that you won't miss an episode. And don't forget to rate and review the show. Have an experience you'd like to share with me? Get in touch at my website, karinamachado.com, or find me on Facebook at Karina Machado Author. After all, there's nothing more powerful than a story.